Jake Murphy's hands shook as he gripped the control stick of his cargo ship. The engine warning lights had been flashing red for the past 6 hours, and he could hear the grinding sound that meant his main thruster was about to give out completely. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, running on nothing but cold coffee and pure stubbornness. The navigation screen showed outpost Kepler 442b just ahead. It was a Zelthari colony station, not exactly on his usual route, but it was the only port within range. Jake didn't care if it was a garbage processing facility at this point. He just needed to land before his ship became a very expensive piece of floating scrap metal. "Come on, baby," he muttered to the ship. Just a little further. The ship shuddered in response, and Jake felt his stomach drop as the backup thrusters kicked in. He had maybe 10 minutes of power left. His eyes burned from staring at screens, and every muscle in his body ached from being tensed for so long. He had eaten his last protein bar 4 hours ago, and his water supply was down to a single bottle that tasted like recycled plastic. The station grew larger in his viewport. It was beautiful in a way that Jake's exhausted brain could barely appreciate. The Zelthari built everything with flowing curves and organic shapes, like they were growing their buildings instead of constructing them. Soft blue and green lights pulsed across the station's surface, and Jake could see dozens of ships docked at various ports. He opened a communication channel. "This is cargo vessel Delta 79 requesting emergency landing clearance. I've got critical engine failure, and I'm running on fumes here," a voice responded immediately, smooth and musical in the way all Zelthari voices sounded. "Delta 79, this is Kepler Station Control. We have you on our sensors. Directing you to Emergency Bay 12. Are you in need of medical assistance?" "Negative on medical," Jake said, fighting back a yawn. "Just need to land before I fall apart." "Understood, Delta 79. Bay 12 is clear. Welcome to Kepler Station." Jake guided his limping ship into the docking bay, with the last reserves of his skill and his fuel. The landing was rough, harder than he would have liked. But the ship was down and intact. That was all that mattered. He shut down the remaining systems, unbuckled his harness, and just sat there for a moment, feeling the relief wash over him. He was on solid ground. "Well, solid station deck." "Close enough." Jake grabbed his duffel bag from the storage compartment. It held everything he owned that mattered. A spare flight suit, some clothes, his grandfather's old compass that didn't work in space but he carried anyway, and a data pad with his shipping contracts. He stumbled down the cargo ramp on legs that felt like rubber. The docking bay was clean and bright, almost painfully so after the dim emergency lighting of his ship. A Zelthari worker approached him, her skin shimmering, with a professional blue-green color. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, with long limbs and features that were almost human but not quite. Her eyes were larger, her movements more fluid. "Your ship will be secured and assessed for repairs," she said in that melodic voice. "Please proceed to the arrival terminal for processing." Jake nodded and followed the illuminated path on the floor. His boots made heavy sounds on the deck, and he was very aware of how he must look. His flight suit was stained with grease and sweat. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His hair was doing something that probably violated several grooming regulations. He smelled like engine coolant and desperation. The arrival terminal was busier than he expected. Dozens of Zelthari moved through the space with graceful efficiency, their skin colors shifting in what Jake knew was their form of nonverbal communication. A few glanced at him as he walked past, and he saw their colors change to curious yellows and ambers. He was probably the first human many of them had seen in person. Humans were still relatively rare in this sector. The Zelthari had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, while Earth was still figuring out steam engines. Most humans stuck to the inner colonies where the gravity and atmosphere felt more like home. Jake had always preferred the frontier routes, where the pay was better and the questions were fewer. He found the registry office and walked up to the counter. The Zelthari woman behind the desk looked up from her screen, and her skin immediately flushed with bright amber curiosity. Her eyes widened slightly. "Hello," she said. "Welcome to Kepler Station. I am Velena." "You are human?" "Last time I checked," Jake said, managing a tired smile. Jake Murphy. I need to file an emergency landing report and find somewhere to sleep for about 12 hours straight. Valana's fingers moved across her console, pulling up forms and data screens. Of course, I have your ship information here. Engine failure. Yes. Our repair facilities are excellent. We will have your vessel assessed by morning. Great, Jake said. About that sleeping part? Yes. Accommodation. Valana pulled up another screen. Her skin was still that curious amber color, and Jake noticed she kept glancing at him like he was a particularly interesting museum exhibit. We have guest quarters available in Residential Sector 7. The gravity is set to Standard Galactic, which I believe is close to your Earth normal? Close enough, Jake said. He would sleep in zero gravity at this point. He would sleep standing up if it meant he could close his eyes. I need some information for our records, Valana said. She began asking questions about his cargo license, his home port, his reason for travel. Jake answered on autopilot, his brain barely processing the words. Valana typed quickly, her long fingers moving across the holographic keyboard. There, she said finally. All processed. Your quarters are assigned. Unit 42 in Residential Sector 7. I have also registered you for our standard visitor welcoming program. Welcoming program? Jake asked, the words not quite making it through the fog in his brain. Yes, it is our custom to provide new visitors with orientation and cultural introduction, Valana explained. Her skin shifted to an excited pink color. I am certain many of our citizens will want to meet you. Humans are quite rare here. We have not had a human visitor in over 3 years. That's nice, Jake said, though he wasn't really listening. Can I go sleep now? Of course. Valana handed him a small device that looked like a smooth stone. This is your access key. The map function will guide you to your quarters. Is there anything else you need? Just a bed, Jake said. Any bed. A floor would work at this point. Valana's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. Our guest quarters are quite comfortable. I hope you rest well, Jake Murphy. Perhaps we will speak again soon. Jake thanked her and followed the glowing path that appeared when he activated the access key. The station corridors were beautiful, lined with plants that seemed to glow from within, and decorated with flowing patterns that probably meant something in Zelthari culture. Jake barely noticed. He was operating on pure instinct now, following the path like a zombie. Residential Sector 7 was quieter than the main areas, with soft lighting that was easier on his tired eyes. He found Unit 42 and pressed his access key to the door panel. It slid open with a soft hiss. The room inside was small but clean. There was a sleeping platform that looked more like a cushioned bench than a bed, a small bathroom area, and a food synthesizer unit in the corner. The walls were a soft blue color, and more of those glowing plants sat in containers near the window. Jake didn't care about any of it. He saw the sleeping platform and nearly cried with relief. He dropped his duffel bag on the floor, kicked off his boots, and collapsed onto the cushions. They were firmer than a human bed, and they smelled faintly like vanilla and something metallic. But Jake was beyond caring. He was asleep in seconds, his last conscious thought being pure gratitude that he was finally horizontal and not moving. Jake woke to the sound of chiming. It was a soft, musical sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He tried to ignore it, pulling the strange-smelling pillow over his head. The chiming continued, gentle but insistent. He cracked one eye open and saw unfamiliar walls glowing with soft blue light. For a moment, he had no idea where he was. Then, memory came back. The engine failure, the emergency landing, the Xelthari station. The chiming grew louder. Jake groaned and rolled off the sleeping platform. His body felt stiff, and his mouth tasted like something had died in it. But he had slept. God, he had slept. He checked the time on his datapad, and was shocked to see 12 hours had passed. 12 solid hours of unconsciousness. It felt like a miracle. The chiming was coming from his door. Someone was requesting entry. Jake stumbled across the room, still wearing his dirty flight suit, and pressed the panel to open the door. He expected maybe a station worker with a repair report, maybe Valana with some paperwork he had forgotten to sign. Instead, he found 7 Galthari women standing in his doorway. They were all young. Or at least Jake assumed they were young based on the bright colors swirling across their skin. They held plates of food, containers of what looked like flowers, and various wrapped packages. Their skin patterns glowed with excited pinks and golds and oranges. Colors Jake had learned meant happiness and curiosity. Velana was among them, standing slightly in front of the others. Her skin was that same amber color from yesterday, but brighter, more intense. "Good morning, Jake Murphy," she said with a smile. "We are the welcoming committee. We have brought you food and gifts to celebrate your arrival at our station." Jake stared at them. His brain, still foggy from sleep, struggled to process what was happening. "Welcoming committee?" "Yes," said another Zelthari woman, shorter than Velana, with skin that sparkled like starlight. "I am Syria. We are very excited to meet our first human visitor. May we come in?" Jake wanted to say no. He wanted to explain that he was not really a visitor, that he was just passing through, that his ship would be fixed in a few days and he would be gone. He wanted to say that he had not brushed his teeth yet and probably smelled like a gym locker, but they were all looking at him with such genuine excitement, their skin glowing with happy colors. And Jake had never been good at disappointing people. "Sure," he said, stepping aside. "Come in, I guess." They swept into his small quarters like a colorful wave. Within seconds, they had covered his small table with food, arranged the glowing flowers near the window, and set the wrapped packages on his sleeping platform. Jake stood in the middle of it all, feeling overwhelmed and confused. "We have brought breakfast foods," Velana explained, gesturing to the plates. "We were not certain what humans eat, so we brought variety. This is kava fruit, very sweet. This is protein grain, very filling. This is spiced vegetables in cream sauce." Jake's stomach growled loudly. He had not eaten anything substantial in over a day. The food looked strange, but smelled incredible. "Thank you," he said. "This is really kind of you." "It is our custom," Syria said. She was bouncing slightly on her feet, her skin flickering with barely contained excitement. "We must ask, is it true that humans come from a death world?" Jake had just picked up what looked like a spiced vegetable and nearly dropped it. "A what?" "A death world," another Zelthari woman said. She was taller than the others, with deep blue skin patterns. "We have read that Earth has extreme weather, dangerous predators, and deadly diseases. Yet humans thrived there. Is this accurate?" "Well," Jake said slowly, taking a bite of the vegetable, "it tasted like mushrooms and pepper. And it was delicious. I mean, Earth has its challenges. We get hurricanes and tornadoes. Some animals can be dangerous if you bother them, but we also have medicine and buildings and air conditioning." The Xelthari women all made sounds of amazement, their skin colors shifting rapidly. "Air conditioning," one of them repeated with wonder. "You had to invent ways to cool your own air because your planet was too hot?" "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "And heating for when it was too cold. Earth has a lot of different climates." This led to more questions. They wanted to know about seasons, about oceans, about the fact that Earth had only one sun. They asked about human cities and human families and human food. Jake answered between bites, barely able to keep up with their curiosity. He learned that the Zelthari came from a world that was remarkably stable, the same temperature year-round, predictable weather, calm oceans, no large predators. Their entire evolution had happened in an environment of safety and consistency. Earth, by comparison, sounded insane to them. "Is it true?" Velana asked, her voice dropping to something almost reverent. "That humans form friendships quickly? That you can meet someone and become companions without years of compatibility study?" Jake paused with a piece of sweet kava fruit halfway to his mouth. "Yeah, I guess. I mean, sometimes you just click with someone. You meet them and you get along and boom, you are friends." The room erupted in flashing colors. The Xelthari women were practically glowing with excitement. They spoke rapidly to each other in their own language, their skin patterns pulsing and shifting in what Jake realized was a form of communication beyond words. This is remarkable, Syria said, turning back to Jake. For Xel3, friendship requires careful evaluation. We must assess logical compatibility, shared interests, complementary life patterns. It can take years to properly form a friendship bond. That sounds exhausting, Jake said honestly. Velana's skin flashed with what might have been embarrassment or amusement. It is simply how we are. Logic and order guide us in all things. Emotion without logic leads to chaos. Jake thought about his own life. The friends he had made in port bars over shared drinks and stupid stories. The cargo pilots he trusted based on gut feeling and handshake deals. The woman he had dated for 6 months before realizing they had nothing in common except physical attraction. Maybe the Xelthari had a point about the logic thing, but he also thought about the spontaneous kindness of strangers, the random acts of human connection that made life worth living. The way his grandmother had always said that some people were just meant to be in your life, and you knew it the moment you met them. I think both ways have merit, he said diplomatically. The questions continued for another hour. They asked about human music, human art, human sports. They were fascinated by the concept of competitive games, where the entire point was to win against other people. The Xelthari apparently played games too, but they were designed for everyone to achieve equal success through optimal strategy. Jake tried to explain football, and immediately regretted it when they looked horrified at the idea of humans deliberately crashing into each other for entertainment. Finally, after what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, Velana glanced at her wrist device. We should go, she said reluctantly. Jake Murphy needs time to adjust and make his own schedule. The other women agreed, though their skin colors showed disappointment. They gathered their empty plates and containers, still talking among themselves in excited bursts of their language. At the door, Velana paused. The station commander has requested to meet you, she said. And there is a cultural exchange dinner planned for tomorrow evening. Also, the Education Center has asked if you would be willing to speak to students about Earth and human culture, and the Engineering Guild would like to discuss your ship repairs with you. And, wait, Jake interrupted. How long did you say my ship repairs would take? 3 to 4 days, minimum, Velana said. Your main thruster needs complete replacement. We must order the parts from the supply depot. Jake's heart sank. 3 to 4 days. Maybe longer if there were complications. He had contracts to fulfill, delivery deadlines to meet, but more than that, he had a sudden vision of 3 to 4 days of constant attention and questions, and welcoming committees. He had just wanted a place to sleep. Now he was apparently the most interesting thing to happen to this station in years. I will send you the schedule, Velana said, mistaking his silence for agreement. Her skin glowed with happy pink tones. I am very pleased you are here, Jake Murphy. I think we will learn much from each other. After they left, Jake stood in his quarters, surrounded by empty plates and glowing flowers. The room smelled like spices and vanilla. His table was covered with unwrapped gifts, a datapad loaded with information about the station, a translator device, a flowering plant in a small pot, and something that looked like a crystal but felt warm to the touch. Jake sat down on his sleeping platform and laughed. It was a tired, slightly hysterical sound. He had flown through half the galaxy hauling cargo, dealt with pirates and corrupt port authorities, survived engine failures and asteroid fields, but he had never expected to be adopted by an entire colony of curious alien women who thought humans were the most fascinating thing in the universe. His original plan had been simple: land, sleep, repair, ship, leave. Now that plan seemed laughably naive. Jake looked at the schedule Velana had sent to his datapad. It was completely full. Every day for the next week had multiple events, meetings, and activities all centered around him. He flopped back on the sleeping platform and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the station, 7 Xelthari women were probably planning even more ways to study and befriend the strange human who had crash-landed into their orderly lives. Jake closed his eyes and smiled despite himself. It was going to be an interesting few days. 3 days into his stay at Kepler Station, Jake had given up on the idea of privacy. The Xelthari women had decided he was their new favorite research project, and there was no escaping their enthusiastic attention. Velana had appointed herself as his unofficial guide. She showed up at his quarters every morning with breakfast and a list of people who wanted to meet him. Syria came by in the afternoons with questions about everything from human reproduction to human cooking methods. The other members of the welcoming committee rotated through his schedule like a well-organized tag team. Jake found it exhausting and flattering in equal measure. But something interesting was starting to happen. Something he had not expected. It started on the third day, when Syria invited him to visit her workplace. She worked in one of the station's hydroponics facilities, a massive dome filled with plants and glowing growth lights. The air smelled like fresh soil and growing things. "We have a problem," Syria explained as they walked between rows of leafy green vegetables. Her skin was flickering with frustrated orange patterns. "For the past month, our yield has been dropping. We have run every diagnostic test. We have adjusted nutrient levels, checked for disease, analyzed the soil composition. Nothing explains the failure." Jake looked around the facility. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect, actually. The rows were mathematically precise. The lighting was calibrated to the exact spectrum. The temperature controls showed perfect consistency. "Show me your systems," he said. Syria led him to a control room where 3 other Kelthari engineers were studying screens full of data. They explained their situation in detail, showing Jake charts and graphs and readouts that meant very little to him. He was a cargo pilot, not a botanist. But Jake had grown up helping his grandfather with a vegetable garden, and he had learned a long time ago that sometimes problems were simpler than people thought. He walked back into the growing area and just looked around. Not at the data, not at the measurements, just at the physical space. After a few minutes, he noticed something. "That air vent," he said, pointing up. "The one right above your water recycling system." "Is it new?" Syria checked her data pad. "Yes. It was installed 6 weeks ago as part of our ventilation upgrade." Jake walked over to the water system and held his hand near it. Then he held his hand near the air vent directly above. "Your vent is blowing warm air down onto your water system. The heat is causing temperature fluctuations that are too small for your sensors to flag as problems, but big enough to stress your plants." The Zelthari engineers stared at him. "But the system specifications say—" "I don't care what the specifications say," Jake interrupted. "Your plants are getting temperature stress from that vent. Move your water system 3 meters that way. Or put up a deflector to redirect the airflow." There was a long silence. The Zelthari looked at each other, their skin colors shifting through confused patterns. "That is not the standard protocol for troubleshooting environmental systems," one of the engineers said slowly. "No," Jake agreed. "But it will work." They made the change. Within 2 days, the plants started recovering. Within a week, the yield was back to normal levels. Syria came to Jake's quarters with her skin glowing so bright with happiness that Jake had to shield his eyes. "How did you know?" she demanded. "What analysis did you perform? What calculations?" "I just looked at it," Jake said with a shrug. "Sometimes the answer is obvious if you stop overthinking." Word spread fast. The human could solve problems by just looking at them. The human used something called intuition instead of pure logic. The human had fixed in 5 minutes what had stumped trained engineers for a month. Suddenly, Jake was being pulled into situations all over the station. A traffic flow problem in the main market, where Zelthari kept bumping into each other despite having carefully planned movement patterns. Jake watched for 10 minutes and suggested that everyone just walk on the right side of the corridor and let faster traffic pass on the left. The Zelthari were amazed. It was so simple, so obvious. Why had no one thought of it before? A scheduling conflict at the community center, where 3 different groups all needed the same space at the same time. They had been trying to create a complex rotation system that satisfied everyone's logical requirements. Jake suggested they go first come, first served, and people could sign up for time slots a week in advance. Revolutionary. The Zelthari called it. Jake called it common sense. A restaurant owner named Kestra who complained that her business was slow despite having optimal food quality and competitive prices. Jake sat in her restaurant for an hour and noticed that she never smiled at customers. She greeted them with efficient professionalism, took their orders accurately, and delivered their food promptly. But there was no warmth, no welcome. Try smiling, Jake suggested. Try asking people how their day is going. Make small talk. Humans call it customer service. Kestra looked confused. But that is not relevant to food delivery efficiency. No, Jake agreed. But it makes people feel good. And when people feel good, they want to come back. Kestra tried it. Within days, her business had doubled. She came to thank Jake with tears in her large eyes, her skin glowing with gratitude. Jake found himself becoming something unexpected. A problem solver, a consultant. A bridge between human intuition and Zelthari logic. Villana explained it to him one evening as they sat in his quarters eating dinner. She had started bringing him meals regularly, claiming that he needed to try authentic Zelthari cuisine. Jake suspected she just liked having an excuse to spend time with him. We Zelthari evolved on a world without chaos, she said, her skin pulsing with thoughtful blue tones. Our planet was stable, predictable. Our weather followed patterns. Our ecosystems were balanced. Our evolution favored logic and planning because those traits helped us thrive in a predictable environment. And humans? Jake asked. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill you, Villana said simply. Your planet had weather that could change in hours, predators that hunted you, diseases that spread through your populations, earthquakes and floods and droughts. Your evolution favored adaptability, intuition, the ability to make quick decisions with incomplete information. You had to expect the unexpected because your world was fundamentally chaotic. Jake had never thought about it that way. He had always just assumed everyone thought like humans did. But listening to Villana, he began to understand how different the Zelthari really were. So, when I solve your problems, he said slowly, I'm doing it the way a human would, by trusting my gut. By looking for the simple answer instead of the complex one. Yes, Villana said. Her skin was glowing with that amber color that Jake had learned meant she was interested in something, or someone. You see patterns that we miss because we are looking for logical explanations. You trust instinct that we have been taught to ignore. You embrace uncertainty that we try to eliminate. And that's useful to you? Jake asked. Villana moved closer to him. In the weeks since he had arrived, they had grown comfortable with each other. She no longer treated him like a museum exhibit. He no longer felt nervous around her alien presence. They had become something that felt like friendship, though Jake suspected it might be developing into something more complicated. It is very useful, she said quietly. You have shown our young people that logic is not the only path to success. That intuition has value, that sometimes the best solution is the simple one. The elders are divided on whether this is good or bad, but I think it is necessary. We, Zelthari, have become too rigid, too dependent on our systems and protocols. You are teaching us to be flexible again. Jake looked down at his hands. Hands that could fix a water system problem in minutes. Hands that had shaken thousands of hands in casual human friendship. Hands that his grandmother had taught to plant tomatoes by feel rather than measurement. I'm just being myself, he said. Exactly, Villana replied. Her skin glowed brighter. And yourself is remarkable. The next day, Syria approached Jake with an unusual request. The education center wanted him to teach a class. Not just give a talk, but actually teach a regular course on human problem-solving methods. Jake laughed at first. I'm not a teacher. I'm a cargo pilot. You are a human, Syria said. And right now, that is what we need. Our young people are hungry for new perspectives. They want to learn how to think like you do. How to see problems the way humans see them. Please, Jake, will you try? Jake thought about it. He thought about his grandfather who had taught him to trust his instincts. About the countless times his human intuition had saved his life, or solved a problem that logic alone could not crack. About the Zelthari who were so brilliant and capable, but trapped by their own rigidity. Okay, he said, I'll try. The first class had 20 students. By the second class, there were 50. By the third class, They had to move to a bigger room because over 100 Zelthari wanted to attend. Most of them were young women, their skin glowing with curious colors as they hung on Jake's every word. He taught them about lateral thinking, about trusting gut feelings, about the human concept of good enough instead of perfect. He gave them problems and asked them to solve them without using logic alone. Some of them struggled. Some of them fought against every instinct they had been taught. But slowly, they began to understand. One student asked him how to know when to trust intuition versus when to use pure logic. Jake thought about it for a long moment. Logic is great when you have time and complete information, he said finally. But life doesn't always give you that. Sometimes you have to decide fast. Sometimes you have incomplete data. Sometimes the right answer isn't the logical one. It's the human one. The one that accounts for emotion and connection and the messy reality of living beings. The students absorbed this like water in a desert. After class, Velana walked with him back to his quarters. "You are changing us," she said softly. "The whole colony is talking about the human teacher and his strange lessons. Some of the elders are concerned. But many of the young people are excited. They see possibilities they never imagined before." "Is that good?" Jake asked. Velana stopped walking and turned to face him. Her skin shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple that Jake had never seen before. "I think," she said carefully, "that it is necessary. Growth requires change. Change requires challenge. You are challenging everything we thought we knew about how to live and think and solve problems. That is frightening for some, but for others, for me, it is wonderful." Jake looked at her. At this alien woman who had become so important to him in such a short time. At the station that had captured him with kindness instead of force. At the life he was accidentally building here. His ship had been repaired 2 days ago. The parts were in. The thruster was replaced. And his vessel was ready to fly. He could leave any time he wanted. He had not told anyone that yet. Jake's teaching had become the most popular class in the colony. Every session brought more students, more questions, more Zelthari eager to learn about human ways of thinking. The education center had to assign him their largest lecture hall, and even that was getting crowded. But success brought complications that Jake had not anticipated. It started when he noticed that several of the Zelthari women in his classes were showing up with gifts. Small things at first. A data crystal, containing Zelthari poetry, a hand-woven fabric with intricate patterns. A container of rare spices from their homeworld. Velana and Syria were the most frequent gift givers, but others joined in too. Jake accepted the gifts politely, thinking it was just a cultural thing. He had learned that Zelthari showed appreciation through tangible offerings. He did not realize what it actually meant until Kestra, the restaurant owner, explained it to him over lunch. "You do know they are courting you," she said casually, her skin flickering with amusement. Jake choked on his drink. "They're what?" "Courting, demonstrating romantic interest. By Zelthari standards, you have received formal courtship offers from at least 12 females. The gift-giving, the constant presence, the requests for private conversation, these are all traditional courtship behaviors." Jake set down his glass very carefully. "I did not know that." Kestra's amusement grew. "Humans do not have gift-giving courtship rituals?" "We do," Jake said weakly. "But usually we talk about it first. We make our intentions clear. We don't just start giving gifts and assume the other person understands what it means." "How wonderfully direct," Kestra said. "Very human. But you should know that Velana and Syria are particularly serious about their interest in you. They have been documenting compatibility factors. That is a very significant step in Zelthari courtship." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Documenting compatibility factors?" "Yes. It is how we determine if a relationship will be successful. We analyze shared interests, complementary life goals, emotional compatibility, practical considerations. It typically takes 6 months to a year to complete proper documentation before proceeding to actual relationship formation." Jake thought about the long conversations he had been having with Velana, the way she asked him about his childhood, his dreams, his fears, The careful notes she sometimes took on her datapad. He had thought she was just being a thorough friend. Apparently, he had been wrong. I should talk to them, Jake said. That would be wise, Kestra agreed. Especially since you are leaving soon, yes? Your ship has been repaired. Jake nodded slowly. His ship had been ready for 5 days now. He had been finding excuses not to leave. One more class to teach. One more problem to solve. One more dinner with Velana, but he had contracts, deadlines, a cargo run to Epsilon Station that was already overdue. He could not stay on Kepler Station forever, no matter how comfortable he had become. That evening, Jake invited Velana to his quarters. She arrived with her skin glowing that amber color that he had come to associate with her happiness around him. She brought dinner, as had become their custom. They ate together in comfortable silence for a while, before Jake finally gathered his courage to speak. Velana, I need to talk to you about something. Her skin shifted slightly, becoming more cautious. Of course. I've been here for almost 3 weeks, Jake said. My ship has been ready to leave for days. I have cargo contracts that I'm already late for. I should go. Lucrously, I have cargo contracts. I've been here for almost 3 weeks. Velana's skin flickered through several colors rapidly, amber to blue to a dark gray that Jake had learned meant sadness or disappointment. I see, she said quietly. Yes, of course. You have your own life, your own work. We always knew you were just passing through. Velana, Jake said gently. Kestra told me about the courtship rituals. About what the gifts mean. About compatibility. Documentation. Velana's skin flushed with embarrassed pink. I should have been more direct, more human about it. But I did not want to pressure you, or make you uncomfortable. I thought if I followed proper Xelthari protocols, you would understand gradually. I didn't understand, Jake admitted. I thought we were becoming friends. Which we are. But I didn't realize you were thinking about something more serious than friendship. Are you upset? Velana asked, her voice small. No, Jake said truthfully. I'm flattered, and honestly, if things were different, if I didn't have a life out there among the stars, I think I would want to explore that possibility with you. You've become important to me, Velana. These past weeks have been some of the happiest I've had in years. But you must leave. Velana finished for him. I should leave, Jake corrected. That's different than must. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Velana did something unexpected. She reached out and took Jake's hand. Her skin was warm and smooth, and Jake felt a small tingle where they touched. I do not regret my interest in you, she said firmly. Even if you leave tomorrow and never return. Knowing you has changed me. Changed all of us. You have shown us that there are other ways to think, to solve problems, to live. That is a gift more valuable than any relationship could be. Jake squeezed her hand gently. You've changed me too. I've spent 10 years flying cargo routes alone, keeping people at a distance, never staying anywhere long enough to form real connections. I told myself I liked the solitary life. But these weeks with you, with Syria and the others, I've remembered what it's like to be part of something, to matter to people, to have people matter to me. What will you do? Velana asked. I don't know, Jake admitted. Part of me wants to fire up my engines and leave tonight, get back to my familiar life before I get too attached. But another part of me wants to stay, to keep teaching, to keep learning about your people, to see where this thing between us might go. Velana's skin brightened slightly. The station commander wants to meet with you tomorrow. Did you know that? I got the message, Jake said. I figured it was about teaching schedules or something. Perhaps, Velana said with a small smile. Or perhaps it is about something else. The next morning, Jake presented himself at the station commander's office. Kesrun was an older Xelthari with skin that stayed a consistent deep blue, which Jake had learned indicated maturity and authority. Her office was filled with plants and flowing water features, creating an atmosphere of calm. Jake Murphy, she said, gesturing for him to sit. Thank you for coming. Of course, Commander. Please, call me Kesrun. We are not so formal here. She studied him with large, intelligent eyes. You have caused quite a stir on my station. I apologize if I've caused problems, Jake said. Problems? No. Change? Yes. Significant change. Kesrun poured a pale blue liquid into 2 cups and offered one to Jake. It tasted like mint and honey. My elders are divided on what your presence means for our colony. Some see you as a disruptive force, challenging our traditional ways of thinking and behaving. Others see you as an opportunity for growth and evolution. Which side are you on? Jake asked. Kesrun's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. I am on the side of the colony's well-being, and I have concluded that your presence here has been beneficial, despite, or perhaps because of, the changes you have introduced. I'm planning to leave soon, Jake said. My ship is ready, and I have work obligations. I am aware, Kesrun said. I have also been made aware that several of our young females have developed strong interest bonds with you, which has created some social complications. The Xelthari do not typically share romantic interest in the same individual. It creates logical problems in our courtship systems. Jake felt heat rising to his face. I didn't mean for that to happen. Of course not. You were simply being yourself, which is apparently very attractive to our people. Kesrun set down her cup. I have a proposition for you, Jake Murphy. I would like to offer you a position as cultural liaison for Kepler Station, a formal role with compensation, living quarters, and the authority to continue your teaching while also serving as a bridge between human and Xelthari perspectives. Jake stared at her. You want me to stay? I want to give you the option to stay, Kesrun corrected. For 6 months, initially, with the possibility of extension, you would help us understand human thinking, help train our young people in adaptive problem-solving, and perhaps help us navigate some of the social complications that have arisen. The social complications being the multiple women who apparently want to date me? Jake asked. Kesrun's skin flickered again. Among other things, your presence has raised questions about how we form relationships, how we define compatibility, how we balance logic and emotion. These are important questions that we have avoided for too long. Jake thought about his cargo routes, about the contracts waiting for him, about the solitary life he had lived for so long, moving from port to port without ever really connecting with anyone. Then he thought about Velana's hand in his, about Syria's excited questions, about the students who looked at him like he was showing them a whole new universe, about the feeling of being needed, of being valued, of being part of something larger than himself. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, Kesrun said. Take whatever time you need. But Jake Murphy, let me tell you something that I have learned in my years as commander. Sometimes the best destinations are the ones we never planned to reach. Sometimes we find our home in the most unexpected places. Jake left the commander's office with his head spinning. He walked through the station corridors without really seeing them, lost in thought. His feet carried him automatically to the hydroponics facility, where he knew Syria would be working. She looked up as he entered, and her skin immediately glowed with happy colors. Jake, I was hoping you would visit today. I wanted to show you the new growth patterns. The changes you suggested have increased our yield by 15%. Jake watched her enthusiasm, her genuine joy at sharing her work with him. He thought about leaving and never seeing that smile again. Never hearing her excited explanations of plant biology, never being part of her world. Syria, he said. If I stayed here, on the station, for a while longer, would that complicate things for you? Her skin went very still, all the colors fading to a soft silver. Complicate things? How? Velana told me about the courtship rituals, about the gifts and the documentation. I know that multiple women having interest in the same person creates problems in your culture. Syria was quiet for a long moment. Then her skin brightened to a determined orange. You are not Xelthari, she said. Perhaps Xelthari rules do not need to apply to you. Perhaps this is another area where human flexibility can teach us something new. Jake laughed despite himself. You're saying that my presence here might change how your entire species thinks about relationships? Why not? Syria asked with a smile. You have already changed how we think about problem-solving, decision-making, and social interaction. What is one more tradition to challenge? Jake realized something in that moment. He had come to this station exhausted, looking for nothing more than a bed and some peace. But he had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found people who valued him not despite his human weirdness, but because of it, who wanted to learn from him and teach him in return, who made him feel like he belonged somewhere for the first time in years. His ship was ready. His old life was waiting. But his heart was already making a different choice. Jake sent messages to his cargo clients, explaining that he would need to postpone his contracts. Some understood. Others threatened to blacklist him. Jake found that he did not care as much as he thought he would. Money could be made again. Contracts could be renegotiated. But this chance, this community, this feeling of belonging, that was harder to find. He accepted Kesrun's offer to stay for 6 months as cultural liaison. The announcement caused a wave of excitement through the colony. Valana's skin glowed so brightly when she heard the news that Jake worried she might actually explode with happiness. Syria threw an impromptu celebration at the hydroponics facility that somehow turned into a party with over 100 Zelthari attending. The complications that Kesrun had warned about did not disappear. If anything, they intensified. Velana and Syria were not the only ones interested in the human. Several other young Zelthari women had made their courtship intentions clear through gifts and formal documentation. By Zelthari standards, this created a logical impossibility. One individual could not properly court multiple interested parties simultaneously. But Jake was not Zelthari. He sat down with all the interested women in a group meeting that Velana organized. It was awkward at first, with 12 Zelthari females sitting in a circle around him, their skin colors flickering with nervous patterns. Look, Jake said, deciding that human directness was the best approach. I know that in your culture, romantic relationships follow very specific protocols. Compatibility documentation, logical assessment, exclusive courtship periods. But I'm human, and humans do things differently. How do humans handle multiple romantic interests? Asked one of the women, an engineer named Lyra. Well, we talk about it, Jake said. We're honest about our feelings. We figure out what everyone wants and what everyone is comfortable with. Sometimes, one person dates multiple people before deciding on a serious relationship. Sometimes friendships are more important than romance. Sometimes things just develop naturally without a lot of planning. The Zelthari looked at each other, their skin patterns pulsing in silent communication. This is very chaotic, Syria said, but she was smiling. Very human. Exactly, Jake agreed. So here's what I propose. I'm going to be here for at least 6 months. During that time, I want to get to know all of you better. As friends, primarily. If something develops into something more with one or more of you, we'll deal with that when it happens. No formal documentation, no rigid protocols. Just people connecting and seeing where things go. You are asking us to abandon our traditional courtship system, Velana said slowly. Her skin was cycling through thoughtful blues and purples. I'm asking you to try something new, Jake corrected. To be flexible. To trust the process, instead of trying to control every outcome. Isn't that what I've been teaching in my classes? There was a long silence. Then Lyra started laughing. A musical sound that made her skin flash with bright yellows. He is using our own lessons against us. He is asking us to apply human adaptive thinking to our personal lives. Is that acceptable? Jake asked nervously. The women looked at each other again. Then, one by one, their skin colors shifted to warm, accepting tones. It is acceptable, Velana said. It is frightening and uncertain, and completely against everything we have been taught. But yes, it is acceptable. We will try the human way. Over the following weeks, Jake settled into his new role. His teaching expanded beyond just problem solving. He started offering classes on human culture, human history, and human philosophy. The Xelthari were fascinated by Earth's chaotic past, by the wars and conflicts and struggles that had shaped humanity. They were amazed by human art, which often rejected logic in favor of emotion and expression. Jake found himself learning as much as he taught. The Xelthari had their own rich culture that he had barely scratched the surface of. Their music was based on mathematical harmonies that hurt Jake's brain to understand, but sounded beautiful. Their literature was sparse on emotion but rich in philosophical complexity. Their art was precise and geometric but somehow still moving. Velana became his closest companion. They spent evenings together, sometimes talking for hours, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. She taught him the Xelthari language, and he taught her English idioms that she found hilarious. When he tried to explain the phrase, "It's raining cats and dogs," she laughed so hard her skin flickered through a rainbow of colors. Syria became his adventure partner. She dragged him to different parts of the station, showing him maintenance tunnels and observation decks, and secret gardens that most residents did not know existed. She had a mischievous streak that her logical upbringing had never quite suppressed. And Jake found himself getting into more trouble with her than he had in years. The other women in his life took on different roles. Lyra became a close friend who challenged him intellectually. Kestra became a mentor figure who gave him advice about navigating Xelthari society. Others drifted in and out of his life in pleasant, uncomplicated ways. Jake's quarters, once a simple sleeping space, transformed into something that felt like a real home. The walls were covered with gifts and artwork. His shelves held plants and crystals and datapads filled with Xelthari poetry and human novels. His food synthesizer was programmed with dozens of recipes, half Xelthari and half human comfort foods that Velana had helped him recreate. 3 months into his 6-month contract, Jake realized he had not thought about leaving in weeks. His cargo ship sat in the hangar, perfectly maintained by the station mechanics but unused. His old life felt distant, like it belonged to a different person. He was teaching a class on human decision-making when a student asked him a question that stopped him cold. "Jake Murphy," the young Xelthari woman said, her skin glowing with curious amber. "Humans have a concept called home. Can you explain what that means to you?" Jake paused at the front of the lecture hall. 100 faces looked at him, waiting for his answer. He thought about the question carefully. "Home is complicated for humans," he said finally. "Some people think home is a physical place. The house where you grew up, the city where you were born. Other people think home is where your family is, but I think home is wherever you feel like you belong. It is where people know your name and are happy to see you. It is where you can be yourself without pretending or hiding. It is where you matter to people, and people matter to you." "And where is your home?" the student asked. Jake looked out at the sea of interested faces. He thought about Velana waiting for him after class with dinner plans, about Syria, who would probably ambush him later with some new discovery she wanted to share, about his quarters filled with gifts and memories, about the problems he had solved, and the students he had taught, and the community that had welcomed him with open arms. "I think," he said slowly, "that home can be anywhere you decide to make it. And sometimes the best homes are the ones you find by accident, in places you never expected to stay." The class ended, and as predicted, Velana was waiting for him in the hallway. Her skin was glowing with that amber color that Jake had come to cherish. "That was a beautiful answer," she said as they walked together toward the residential sector. "About home, it was an honest answer," Jake replied. "When I crash-landed on this station, I was running on empty in more ways than one. I had been alone for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to have people care about me, to have a community, to have a place where I mattered." Velana stopped walking and turned to face him. Her skin shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple that Jake had learned was associated with serious emotion. "You matter to me," she said quietly, "more than I can express in either Xelthari or English. These months with you have been the happiest of my life. I know that you have not made any commitments, that you are still exploring your feelings, that the human way is to let things develop naturally. But I need you to know that whenever you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would very much like to move beyond friendship with you." Jake felt his heart rate increase. He had been avoiding thinking too hard about his feelings for Velana, telling himself that he was just enjoying her company, that it was too soon to think about serious relationships, that he should not complicate things further. But, standing there in the corridor, looking at her earnest face and her glowing skin, he realized he had been lying to himself. He had developed deep feelings for this woman, this alien, logical, brilliant, kind woman who had taken a chance on teaching a lonely cargo pilot that there was more to life than running from port to port. "Velana," he said, taking her hand the way she had taken his weeks ago. "I think I'm ready. I think I've been ready for a while but was too scared to admit it. I'm not good at serious relationships. I've spent 10 years avoiding them, but with you, I want to try. I want to see where this goes." Her skin erupted in brilliant golds and pinks, colors so bright that other Zelthari in the corridor stopped to stare. She threw her arms around Jake in a very un-Zelthari display of emotion, and Jake hugged her back, laughing. "I love how you're getting more human every day," he said into her shoulder. "I love how you're teaching me that logic is not the only path to happiness," she replied. That evening, they had dinner in Jake's quarters, but everything felt different now. The air was charged with possibility. They talked about the future, about what a relationship between a human and a Zelthari might look like, about the challenges they would face and the adventures they might have. When Kes Run approached Jake a few weeks later to discuss renewing his contract, he did not hesitate. "I'll stay for another year," he said. "Maybe longer, if that's acceptable." Kes Run's skin flickered with satisfaction. "More than acceptable. You have become an important part of this community, Jake Murphy. I hope you stay for many years to come." Jake walked back to his quarters that evening as the station lights dimmed for the sleep cycle. Through the windows, he could see the stars beyond. The same stars he had been chasing for a decade in his cargo ship. They were beautiful, but they did not call to him the way they once had. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. A desperate emergency landing. A broken ship. A man who just wanted a place to sleep for a few hours. He had expected to leave within days. Instead, he had found a community that valued him. Students who learned from him. Friends who cared about him. And a woman who had shown him that home was not a place on a star map, but a feeling in your heart. Jake reached his quarters and pressed his hand to the door panel. Inside, Velana was waiting for him. She had started staying over some nights, bringing her work and her laughter and her presence into his space. It felt natural. It felt right. "How was your meeting with Kes Run?" she asked as he entered. "I'm staying for another year," Jake said. Velana's skin exploded with happy colors. "Truly?" "Truly," Jake confirmed. He sat down beside her and took her hand. "I came to this station looking for a bed. The alien girls of this colony had other plans for me. They wanted to study me, learn from me, befriend me. Some of them wanted to court me using protocols I didn't understand." "And did their plans work?" Velana asked with a smile. Jake looked around his quarters, at the walls covered with memories, at the life he had built here, at the woman beside him whose presence made everything better, at the future stretching ahead, uncertain but full of promise. "Yeah," he said softly. "Their plans worked. I came here exhausted and alone, looking for nothing more than a place to sleep. What I found was a place to live, a place to belong, a place that feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been." He pulled Velana close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Her skin glowed with contented purple tones. Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance, but Jake barely noticed them. He had spent years chasing those stars, thinking that freedom meant never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. But he had learned something important on Kepler Station. True freedom was not about running from connections. It was about choosing where to make them. Jake closed his eyes, feeling more at peace than he had in years. Tomorrow he would teach another class. He would solve another problem. He would continue building this unexpected life that had grown from nothing more than an emergency landing and some curious alien women who refused to let him leave without changing him first. He had only wanted a place to sleep. What he found was a place to call home. And that made all the difference.